Universities such as Nalanda of academic knowledge.
Whoa, wow, look at that. That's a gorgeous university. You know, I forget that India has some gorgeous ancient universities. Alright, boys, Gupta Empire. Been a while since I've done Indian subcontinent history. Yeah.
Throughout history, many civilizations ushered periods of prosperity in the regions they grew up in. In the West, many think of classical Greece and imperial Rome as examples of this, while in China, the heights of dynasties like the Tang and Song come to mind. Sandwiched between those two poles of civilization is the Indian subcontinent, another cradle of human civilization full of ethnic and religious diversity, cultural achievements, and magnificent art. India has been ruled over by countless mighty empires over the millennia, but perhaps one of the greatest, ruling during India's classical golden age, is the Gupta Empire. This dynasty, which reigned from the 4th to 6th century CE, produced magnificent art as well as some of India's greatest poets and scholars. Its tenure also saw major developments in religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism that have lasted to this day. What was the Gupta state, and who were its famous kings? How did their economy and statecraft function? And what contributions did they make to Indian and world culture? In this video on the definitive empire of India's classical epoch, we will explore all this and more.
Sponsor?
Our information about the Gupta Empire comes from two sources. The first being literary sources, such as the poet Kalidasa, who may have lived in Gupta times, and the second being archaeological material, which comes in the form of coinage or architecture. Through the appearance of kings' names on coins, art in temples, such as in Udayagiri, which we will discuss later on, or Sanskrit inscriptions in places such as the Pillar in Allahabad, we can pass together a decent inference on the chronology of Gupta history and the core values of its society. Granted, it should be borne in mind that all of these sources are inherently biased, being made, for example, to praise kings of the age, and thus should be absorbed in an academic context rather than at face value. The origins of the Gupta Empire can be found in an era when the Indian subcontinent was in a protracted period of fracturing and transition following the collapse of the Maurya Empire. During this period, various empires that ruled the northwest of the subcontinent, such as the Kushans and Sakas, had risen and fallen. The Ganges plain was equally geopolitically capricious, with various states, such as the Nagas, the Vakatakas, and the Kshatrapas rising to prominence, then collapsing, while large areas remained controlled by the Adivasi peoples or indigenous tribes of various localities. The memory of the Maurya Empire from some 6 centuries before still occupied a giant place in the social memory of India's rulers, as they were the only ones to come close to uniting the subcontinent. The Vahanas, one of the juggernauts of central India, were a shadow of their former selves, but had continued the tradition of patronizing literature and religion, and had begun the process of using Sanskrit as a language of high culture, instead of one only used in religious ritual.
Bruh, Sanskrit, Sanskrit is such an underrated language, bro. Nobody talks about Sanskrit. Bro, I was watching a video, right? Comparing Russian to Sanskrit, and the amount of words that Russian has that is also shared with Sanskrit is insane to me, bro. You know, it's funny. People talk about the Indo-European language family, and usually when people talk about the Indo-European language family, they usually really only just talk about the European side of the Indo-European language family, but completely forget about the Indo side of it. Like, bro. I see that all the time in Europeans. Is like not only that, but Indo-European didn't even originate it like in Europe. Most likely originated on the Indian subcontinent, and then it spread around to places like Europe and the Middle East, because there were some Indo-European languages in the Middle East. Um, or it's funny how nobody talks about the fact that Indians and Europeans are literally family. Literally family. Like I see Europeans clowning Indians all the time. And it's like you do realize you guys are relatives, right? Like without Indians, there probably wouldn't be Europeans. Um you could quote me on that. There probably wouldn't be Europeans. There's a lot of theories on the whole like migration period, but like based on the current uh information that I'm aware of, most if not all of the people who become Europeans, um I did hear some people tell me, oh well, people who will become Europeans, they came through like from Africa to like Anatolia, then they crossed the Black Sea into Europe. But however, Indo-Europeans, the people who become Europeans, they came through modern day Russia. Like they first were spotted around, like that's when they were first spotted by data that we know. And that's the direction that they entered through. That's where they first entered Europe through. So if we look at that map, you could go Google it. I'm not gonna show it here, but I think anyone knows like the map of Ukraine, Russia. Of course we do, because you know what's going on there. But that's where they first like were spotted, like around the border between modern day border between Russia, Ukraine. That's where Indo-Europeans, the people who become Europeans, were spotted. So if we use that and we think to ourselves, okay, if this is where they were first sighted, this direction, and we just use a bit of common sense, where could they have possibly come from? The two theories were Siberia, Central Asia, and India, the Indian subcontinent. Siberia was eventually ruled out because of how inhospitable it was. Central Asia, which is right next to the Indian subcontinent, um, was also eventually ruled out. And they eventually kind of just came to the conclusion that the people who become Europeans, um, 90% most likely came from what's now northern India, around that area ish, right? Of this, northern, like the north of the Indian subcontinent, and they just simply moved through different places until reaching the modern day area of Russia and Ukraine before going deeper into Europe. So it's like, yeah, I just find it funny whenever I see Europeans clown the Indians, because it's like, bro, you guys are low key the same. Like, if you look at the hair, like if you look at European hair and Indian hair, it's low key the same texture too. The only difference is skin tone. Um, and that's because Europe is colder and in a completely different angle of the Earth. So their skin tones just kind of went more white slash pale looking. But if you no, they honestly look the same. I saw a video of a white Indian native to the Indian subcontinent. After this, I'm gonna unpause because I'm talking a lot here. But you know, she looked European as hell, and there were so many Europeans in the comments who refused to believe that she was Indian. People were saying, "Oh, she's from Western Europe." People were saying that, "Oh, she's from Scandinavia." No, she was just from Northern India, which I'm aware that Northern India has a lot of white people. Like just authentic, like white looking Indians who look European, and that's not a coincidence, anyways. So, I mean, the Indian subcontinent is big. You have different climates. You're gonna get stuff like that. You know, I heard the theory that there were freaking like Aryan invaders that invaded northern India, and that's how freaking like there's white Indians today in that region. But that theory has been already like thrown out as no. It's just that Europeans and Indians at one point were more or less the same people. Not only that, but this is true in it that they literally at one point spoke the same language, Indo-European. That's why they're in the same language family, because they're all family. Europeans and Indians, they're all family. So yeah, anyone who says otherwise is it's in denial, and it's stupid how Europeans always clown Indians. Like, honestly, you gotta put some more respect on Indians, in my personal opinion. But
in terms of religion, India was much different to today. The various sects of Buddhism and Jainism, which today are minority faiths in India, were still strong as religions of kings, nobles, and merchants. Hinduism was also in a period of transition. Before the Common Era, the most prevalent form was that of the Vaidika, which focused on worship of multiple deities in a typical Indo-European fashion. Gods such as Indra for thunder, Agni for fire, Varuna for the ocean, and Surya and Chandra for the sun and moon, as they were mentioned in the Vedas. This pre-Gupta period also saw the beginning of the worship of Vishnu and Shiva, as well as the development of Puranas, which brought Hinduism closer to the faith as we understand it today. It is this tumultuous period of Indian history when the land was fractured and its cultures and religion were in a period of transition that the Guptas would emerge onto the scene. The Guptas began their empire in the land of Magadha, the same region from where the Mauryas had risen centuries earlier. This link to the Mauryas became quite important to the Guptas, who used similar tactics of propagation and statecraft to draw parallels between themselves and that prestigious unifying empire of old. The throne of Magadha itself became a tool to help the young empire achieve legitimacy in the eyes of its peers, precisely because of its Mauryan legacy. The founder of the empire was most likely a man named Srigupta, for whom the dynasty is named after. Not much is known about him, as he's left us no coins or inscriptions, although sources from the reigns of later Gupta kings, and even some Chinese monks, claim he ascended to the throne of Magadha around the mid-3rd century CE. Sparse records aside, it's generally accepted that Gupta seems to have established a certain level of control over territories in Magadha, setting the foundations of the empire that would follow. His son, Chandragupta I, would be the Alexander to Magadha's Philip, conquering many kingdoms of the surrounding region, including the Nagas of central India, and establishing the Guptas as an empire. From what we can surmise, the expansion of the empire was quite extensive under Chandragupta, as exemplified by the coinage minted during his reign, whose royal scenes of elegant harpists, noble archers, and Hindu deities project the visual imagery of a world-conquering monarch. After Chandragupta I, the Gupta Empire's most impactful ruler was a man called Samudragupta I, the son of the aforementioned Chandragupta I. His rule was defined by both the conquests he embarked upon, particularly against the western Kshatrapas, the Vakatakas and the Sakas of Gandhara, and the great art he patronized, such as the great poet Harishena's inscriptions on Allahabad. The Allahabad inscription is of particular note, as it showcases the sophisticated written Gupta script, a successor of previous Brahmi scripts and predecessor to the Devanagiri script of later times. Moreover, the words themselves are an intriguing insight into Gupta ideology. This lofty column, the raised arm of the earth, proclaiming as it were that the fame having pervaded the entire surface of the world with rise caused by the conquest of the whole earth, has acquired an easy and graceful movement, in that it has repaired from here to the abode of Indra, the lord of the gods, of that prosperous Samudragupta, the Maharaja Dhiraja. By and large, the Allahabad inscription, alongside other inscriptions of its like, display how Samudragupta and other Gupta monarchs carefully cultivated an image for themselves as warriors, masterful poets, as well as a major philanthropist of religious endowments, all to legitimize their rule as enlightened philosopher kings. Samudragupta's successor, Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya, was also well known for expanding the cultural achievements of the Gupta Empire, and was supposedly a patron of the Navaratnas, or Nine Jewels, a circle of poets who, under Chandragupta II's patronage, managed to produce some of the finest Sanskrit poetry of all time. The Navaratnas' most well-known poet, Kalidasa, extolled his ruler's virtues and power in the language considered to be spoken by the gods of the Hindu pantheon. This practice, which had probably begun under the Sakas and Satavahanas, was popularized by the Guptas and set the standard for thousands of kings from Afghanistan to Java who would use similar Sanskrit language literature for the next millennium. Chandragupta II was not just a man of letters, but also one of conquest, having either vassalized or annexed the Kshatrapas to the east. These campaigns made the Gupta king renowned among people as far-flung as the Buddhist monks of China, with one such monk, Fa Xian, praising him as a great patron of religious endowments. This was not something unique to the Guptas, for the royal sponsorship of religious institutions was a consistent pattern in Indian history. Unlike in later Christian or Muslim kingdoms, which for the most part only had one state religion, Indian rulers often provided equal patronage to all the diverse faiths in their realms. Chandragupta II was no exception to this. While he was himself most likely a devotee of the god Vishnu, he appears to have given land and sponsored temples for various Buddhist sects and alternative Hindu schools. After the passing of Chandragupta II, a series of fairly unremarkable rulers came to occupy the Gupta throne. After them, the empire would receive a rejuvenation in royal vigor with the rise of kings Kumaragupta and Skandagupta. Like his predecessor Chandragupta, Kumaragupta was a beloved sponsor of land grants to all religions, whether Buddhist, Hindu, or Jaina. Skandagupta, meanwhile, was a great warrior, according to the Batari inscription.
Throw it as hard as you want.
Him fending off a Hephthalite invasion from the northwest. Later kings like Narasimhagupta would continue Skandagupta's legacy and continued his policy of fortifying defense from western invaders. However, in an
Before he continues, it's funny, right? How Eurocentric of a world that we live in. I saw a video, was it on Instagram or YouTube? I really forgot where, but it was like, oh, what if the Roman Empire did not exist? How would the world be? Would the world even industrialize? Would we have a civilization? And I was like, I'm like, hello? What about the Indian subcontinent? The Indian subcontinent had a lot more civilizations before the Roman Empire was even around. It's like, bro, not only the Indian subcontinent, but China too. It's like, bruh, if there wasn't any European empire, probably India or China would have. Honestly, I would say India. I probably would say India would probably like end up uniting and dominating the whole world. Kind of like modernizing, industrializing, because India had more than any capabilities to. They were like way ahead of their time before anyone. What really doomed India was the princely states fighting amongst each other, and when the British came, the British just simply used that. I mean, the British East India Company, I should say, just simply used that to its advantage to just conquer the entire subcontinent, right? So that was what really and truly doomed India. But they have more than the capabilities to end up like dominating the whole world, to be honest. Much like how Europe dominates the world today. I would love to see someone make an alternate history timeline where India unites, like Europe doesn't like industrialize or anything. India unites, industrializes, all that. That's actually a fun alternate timeline to think about, because I personally think it was more than possible. There are other places too, like Africa. But the thing with Africa is that Africa was too primitive. They had the potential to also industrialize, but they were just way too primitive that they kind of just shot themselves in the foot, and they didn't really bother advancing because they were just too comfortable with their lifestyle already as is, which eventually came to bite them in their butts, which would eventually lead them to get colonized. Same thing happened to China, actually. China had more than enough to industrialize. China was actually like the center of the world at one point. But they were also too primitive, and they got way too comfortable. That when everybody else was advancing, they fell behind and eventually just got subjugated by Europeans. So until very recently, let's continue.
An echo of the Roman Emperor Trajan, Skandagupta would be the last great Gupta king who expanded the dynasty's power. And from that point on, the empire's borders were set, and for the rest of its history, it would be on the defensive until its slow decline began. Having thus finished a brief chronological survey of the Gupta kings, let us take a pause from the march of history and dive more deeply into what society in the Gupta Empire was like. By and large, the Gupta epoch was an era where high thinkers flourished. Many of the famous Indian scholars of the classical age, such as the great mathematician Aryabhatta, who is said to have been a pioneer of the concept of zero, are said to have lived during this period. Works in astronomy, often based on earlier Greco-Roman breakthroughs, were also a feature of Gupta learning. As previously stated, Sanskrit poetry, written in the unique Gupta script, saw a great flourishing due to the dynasty's generous patronage of poets such as Kalidasa. Inscriptions such as the Prashastis of Allahabad are remarkable for their literary quality, a fact which both gave prestige to the Guptas and enabled their political performance in the arena of classical India. The cultivation of this prestige also extended to other means of literature, such as kavya, a genre encompassing plays, poems, and epics with elegant metaphors. Indian philosophy also developed highly during this period, as the Gupta Golden Age was the time where all 6 schools of Hindu philosophy, Vedanta, Mimamsa, Samkhya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, and Nyaya, were producing pioneering works. A criticism often levied against the Gupta Empire is that it presided over a period where India's cities were in decline. This, however, has been discredited by most modern historians, who assert that during Gupta rule, urban society was still vibrant in most of India. Consequently, this bias may have sprung up due to the fact that Gupta society primarily relied not on cities, but on rural agriculture and mining settlements to fuel its economy, which were sponsored by the royal court through a sophisticated bureaucratic system of tax grants and delegating land management to social notables like local religious figures, for whom religious ritual and land management went hand in hand. Overall, the Guptas ran an efficient yet institutionally diverse realm, by focusing on delegating tasks to local kings they subjugated. Through an efficient system of ministers and prime ministers, as well as delegating work to local Advasi tribes and religious functionaries, the Guptas managed to have a prosperous yet decentralized empire. In addition, the empire was keen to utilize matrimonial alliances for diplomacy. Many kings would have many wives and balance out diplomatic relations through the balancing out of military coercion, economic engagement, and diplomatic means. The Gupta Empire has been called the Golden Age of classical India. The two terms classical and golden age are loaded terms which imply that this was an ideal society and that other periods, usually where different religions were present in India, were lesser. Neither of these are true, but taking those natural biases into account, we can nevertheless admire the many strides that Gupta India made in both art and religion. Gupta art developed from influences from the well-established Mathura, Gandhara and Varanasi schools of art, and is known for its mobility and floral depictions. Gupta art saw an increasing focus on the Hindu deities most prominently worshipped by modern Hindus today, such as the Dashavatara temple in Diagar, dedicated to Vishnu. Here, Vishnu is depicted lounging on Shesha, the king of snakes or nagas, while a woman, his wife, the goddess Lakshmi, is massaging his feet. Beyond Hindu monuments, Buddhist and Jain images of bodhisattvas and tirthankaras also were popular throughout the Gupta realm. Religious monuments often served not only spiritual, but also practical purposes, like the irrigation of land. For example, Udayagiri is a large temple site with various water management systems. A great statue within the site represents the deity Varaha, a large boar man and the third avatar of Vishnu, who stopped a large flood. The statue greets the rising sun in the morning, and the stylized pose embodies the sense of the spiritual power associated with the water management that the temple provides. As aforementioned, the Guptas were major patrons of all major Indian faiths, whether Hindu, Buddhist or Jaina. Many temples during this period received patronage and endowments. Universities such as Nalanda, which was mainly the purview of Buddhists, remained prosperous and strong in their production of academic knowledge.
Whoa, wow, look at that. That's a gorgeous university. You know, I forget that India has some gorgeous ancient universities. Damn.
However, the Guptas were mostly Hindu by persuasion, and as such, it was the quasi-priestly, quasi-judicial Brahmin caste who most likely held the most power among all the spiritual leaders in the Gupta realm. Brahmins received many tax-exempt villages and land grants, establishing their power as economic and social actors. According to Johannes Bronkhorst, the Brahmins could provide many services on matters such as statecraft or astrology, something movements like Buddhism were not able to provide. By that token, it was the Guptas who set up temple Hinduism as we know it today. The site of Bad Pathari is a sophisticated network of temples and statues on the landscape of vast plains, providing protection during monsoon by deities like Shiva and Vishnu. During the Gupta period, the old Vedic pantheon was gradually sidelined in favor of Vaishnavism and Saivism, which focus on Vishnu and Shiva as the supreme beings respectively. Many Gupta kings would identify their royal ideology with the sacred traits of preservation and destruction embodied by Vishnu or Shiva. Sacred texts, like the Puranas, also came about during this period and reflect some of the political reality of the time. Other forms of Hinduism.
I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. Low-key, one of the reasons why I started learning Russian is because the fact that Russian and Sanskrit shares a lot of words. So I was like, wait a minute, if I learn this language, I would get like a glimpse into like some languages on the Indian subcontinent too. So, I mean, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna learn an Indian language for. I doubt I would ever need to. But still, I think that's still pretty cool.
Such as Shaktism, which focuses on the goddess Mahadevi, or less known denominations, like worship of Surya and Kartikeya, were also present. Ultimately, the Guptas were the forerunners of Hinduism's dominance in India. The last Gupta emperors faced an array of political instability and decentralization. Dynastic squabbling, combined with onslaughts of invasions from the northwest, slowly weakened the empire. After Skandagupta, the power and prestige of the crown slowly faded into obscurity, and by the 6th century CE, the Guptas' empire as a whole had faded into memory. However, the innovations of the Guptas are still with us to this day. Their contribution to art and religion, as well as the development of feudalism and Sanskrit in India, made their mark in India for the next millennium. Many later emperors looked to the Guptas as inspirations for kingship, statecraft, and religious innovations. This dynasty, while not as long-lived as some of its contemporaries like Eastern Rome or the Sasanians, made an incredible mark on India in ways that still impact the subcontinent's massive population to this day. This video is sponsored by our
Nice. Indian history. Honestly, Indian history. Hella interesting. You know, I was thinking about what the hell am I going to do a video on today? I was like, yo, I have not done Indian history in a minute. Like, yo. Anyways, if you made it all the way here, you let my reaction, you have more videos like this that you would love to see my reactions to, you would love to hear what I have to say, you could always suggest it to me in the comments. As always, eventually I will do it. If you want your suggestions to be done quicker and you're an active viewer of mine, I recommend you become a channel member for 99 cents a month. I'm only recommending this to the active viewers, not just anyone. The perks that you get access to the VIP Discord server where you get news on when your suggestions are going to be done. You get access to members week, whereby for 1 week I only do members reaction. And you might think, oh, but that doesn't sound like anything. And there's more perks to come. I'm gonna like eventually do more perks in future. However, we still have a few members, so there is no need to increase the perks right now. But like, for example, when I got in that car accident and I got that concussion, people were thinking that, like, oh my gosh, like you're gonna stop uploading. I was like, hell no. I was constantly updating my members, like what was going on, when I'm gonna return, you know, how I'm gonna get their suggestions done, you know. But anyways, if you want to check out more info on that, you could go on my channel page. You just click the join button. There's gonna be like a video like less than 3 minutes explaining all the perks that you get, because I'm too lazy to explain it here. Make sure to subscribe, turn the bell notifications on, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.